Next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. This is a fun argument. Peter Reinhardt is a former chief prosecutor of New York City's juvenile court. He has an op-ed in the Journal tackling Alvin Bragg's prosecution of former President Trump. And since he invoked Thomas Dewey, he asks, would Thomas Dewey have prosecuted FDR the way that Alvin Bragg prosecuted Trump? Dewey's the example of the independent prosecutor that Bragg invoked. So Reinhardt asks, would DA Dewey have sought an indictment based on a similar fact pattern? History suggests not. When Dewey was district attorney, FDR was president. In 1921, Roosevelt had been stricken with polio, which left him partially paralyzed, in need of a wheelchair, as we all now know. But concerned about public perception then, the White House made every effort to cover up the president's disability, going as far as using devices that made it appear that he was walking. White House officials suppressed press photographs of the president in his wheelchair, and the Secret Service confiscated and destroyed film when journalists snapped forbidden pictures. Roosevelt did all this to influence the outcome of the election. And Dewey ran against him in 1944, never sought an indictment. As far as we know, no such prosecution was ever contemplated because Tom Dewey was focused on men like mobsters Lucky Luciano and Dutch Schultz. But the 1930s aren't the present, and so Bragg has ushered in a new process for the evolving modern professional prosecutor's office. That standard declares that a minor impropriety designed to hide facts from the electorate is a felony. Perhaps Mr. Bragg thinks FDR got off easy. Oh, wonderfully argued, Counselor. For more on this and other legal/political matters, pleased to be joined by Paul Ingrassia, who's a constitutional scholar and a former Claremont fellow. He's also a board member of the New York Young Republican Club. Paul Ingrassia, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on this morning.
If you're welcome to comment on the Reinhardt's argument in the really parody almost in the Wall Street Journal, but the larger issue of Trump's legal options. Obviously, you've got a lot of constitutional lawyers and professors arguing back and forth about what the options are and what the likelihood is. But it seems that the net at present is that he is going to be sentenced on July 11th. Do you disagree?
Well, it seems like that is the current state of affairs here in New York City. Now, obviously, this is an evolving situation. Things may change. I was there at the courthouse last week, of course, when they announced the verdict and when they scheduled the sentencing date for July 11th at 10:30 a.m. So I will be there on the ground again, unless, things change between now and then. But, the Reinhardt, just going back to your earlier point about what Reinhardt said, you had in the 1940s under Roosevelt an incapacitated president, basically someone, especially during his last presidential election there in 1944, someone who was almost on, about to pass away. He was in real terminal shape, and of course they had to cover that up from the public at the time because we were still waging World War II. And then just kind of fast forward 80 years later, we have Joe Biden there at the scene in Normandy, commemorating, of course, D-Day and what the troops did there. And he basically had to be ushered off the stage because we see our current commander-in-chief in a similar state of incapacity, or incapacitated. But yet again, this is not something that can be easily covered or hidden from the public, much as it was in the 1940s. I mean, it's quite apparent for the world to see that our current commander-in-chief lacks the intellectual and now it seems like even physical faculties to carry out the duties of his office. And that's in sharp contrast with President Trump, who, has been just incredible in terms of the stamina and going through this entire ordeal over the past.
Yeah, maybe.
Week.
Maybe if they give Biden some sort of stimulant before the June 27th debate and that's not disclosed, that's a prosecutable offense now.
It could be. It could be. I mean, it seems like anything under the sun. Although, if your name is Donald Trump, of course, they'll custom tailor anything, the law to befit the situation, because obviously the goal here. This is the example, the classic case of show me the man, I'll show you the crime. There was no crime. There was no underlying crime to be had here. This was a case that had been cleared previously by the FEC. I mean, they're alleging a federal election, an FEC violation here. Why is it appearing in state court? Why was this matter brought in state court in the first place? No one seems to know the answer to that question. The bottom line is there is no underlying crime. Alvin Bragg did not have the jurisdictional authority to prosecute President Trump here. Neither did Merchan, neither did ultimately Biden, who is basically the one calling the shots ultimately in this case. But, it's the real tragedy and travesty of this whole thing is, we're bringing our criminal justice system in New York State and New York City specifically to ruin. And regardless of, I think President Trump is going to benefit from this politically. He's raised hundreds of millions of dollars in the month of May alone, which was record-breaking. His poll numbers are better than ever. But the permanent mark on our justice system is one that's going to take a long time to rehabilitate and repair from this.
Yeah, well, the Democrats, they thought 2 times impeached president, that would work, didn't. Now they've convicted felon. In Arizona today, they're putting up 38-plus billboards that say Trump, convicted felon. That's not going to stick. And the black community is even embracing the verdict that came down. And so are a lot of people that were undecided. So I think this is what's next then? Because this isn't going to stick. So what else can they do?
I know. Exactly. That's exactly right. His support among these, among the black community, among Hispanics is through the roof. And I think, just across every demographic group, it doesn't matter who you are, what your background is. They see this as a sham show trial, as a kangaroo court, and they see us as a descent into sort of this banana republic territory. We've never been here as a country before. People who have family ties or who have themselves have memories of the former Soviet Union, the Eastern Bloc, they see what's going on to our justice system in America as being basically on point with what they're familiar with. And, of course, those who came from socialist and communist countries to our south, whether it's Venezuela or communist Cuba, they see exactly what's going on in the United States as replicating that same playbook. So, I think President Trump, obviously will benefit politically from this. It's just a matter of, how the sentencing will go about, how it will proceed, and what ultimately happens regarding the weaponized system of justice. That's an open question. And obviously this is election interference of the highest order that is currently going on in the country. And that is the end goal of this, to keep him off the campaign trail, to keep him out of states like Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina, and in Pennsylvania, where he's up in every single poll. You look across the board, he's doing amazingly well in the polls, in the RCP average of his poll numbers, which is better than he ever did in 2016 or 2020. And I think that is in part catalyzed by what we're seeing with these indictments against him.
Well, lost in all that's going on with Trump and to a lesser extent with Hunter Biden is an important Supreme Court decision. There's many to come this month before their term ends, but one of them is Fisher versus United States, and this is with respect to the federal statute under which so many individuals present at the Capitol on January 6th have been charged. This is Section 1512C2 that has been much discussed, that criminalizes efforts to corruptly obstruct, influence, or impede an official proceeding. And the federal government has used an expansive interpretation of that provision to snare a lot of people who weren't even inside the Capitol but were on the grounds as still being party to trying to impede an official proceeding back on January 6th. What is your take on the prospect that the SCOTUS will rule in favor of the plaintiff in the case, and the sort of impact that would have if it would be, I think, number in the hundreds of convictions that were overturned.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's any hope of any of these cases, being overturned, and I'm talking, of course, about the Trump cases and the ongoing Bragg case, but especially this 1512 case that is appearing before the Supreme Court, which will have implications for all these other cases, because obviously, if these convictions are overturned, that will send shockwaves across the justice system. It will send a very strong precedent, and it'll also indicate how the Supreme Court might rule on future cases. So I'm optimistic about the Supreme Court here. Of course, this is a 6-3 Republican majority on the Supreme Court. 3 of the justices were appointed by President Trump himself. And obviously, I think this is an issue that the court sees as deeply concerning regarding the political prosecution of political dissidents to the Biden regime. So based on the arguments we're hearing and based on sort of the tenor of the court, and, they went after Justice Alito recently, the left, because it was, an image circulated online that that his wife flew an upside down American flag right around January 2021. So, I think the court has received a lot of scrutiny from the left and a lot of attacks by the left, and I think they want to, not make this an issue for the 2024 presidential election. They don't want to keep this warfare going on. I think the court's goal is to sort of lessen the flames of these controversies, and I think they'll do that and by ruling in favor of the January 6th defendants here. I think that's a strong possibility.
Paul Ingrassia is a constitutional scholar, Claremont Fellow, and board member of the New York Republican Club. He is also writes at Substack, paulingrassia.substack.com. Paul, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
The IRS finally caught up with Louie.
I hadn't paid my taxes in 8 years. I owed the IRS a lot of money.
Louie was